Arguments have two forms that help to support the conclusion they present: inductive and deductive reasoning. These conclusions are supported by claims in the argument. Deductive reasoning must have claims that are true, and the claims must logically support the conclusion. A deductive reasoning argument uses two completely true claims to logically create another completely true conclusion, so we can be sure that the conclusion of the argument is true and valid.
Inductive reasoning is different to deductive reasoning, as inductive reasoning is used to support a claim, not to prove it. Say you've seen 1,000 birds, and all of them are white. The automatic assumption would be to claim that all birds are white, but this is untrue. However, stating that not all birds are white isn't contradicting yourself, but the information collected is supposed to support your conclusion, not to prove it. Seeing 1,000 white birds does not mean that all birds are white. It just makes it more likely that all birds are white.
The argument that the sun will rise tomorrow uses inductive reasoning. It assumes that because we've seen the sun rise every day, then in the future the sun will continue to rise, and so it will also rise tomorrow morning. The flaw with this is that it is only justified because we assume the laws of nature are uniform. We assume that the whole universe has the same laws of nature. However, we could just be in one section of the universe where the laws of nature are specific to this section of the universe. We don't know for sure if the whole universe is like this. The claim, the sun will rise tomorrow, rests on unjustified assumptions, and therefore we can't be sure the sun will rise tomorrow.
To help you understand, let us use a penguin example to explain. A penguin lives his entire life on an iceberg, so the only scenery he can see is ice. Because this is all he's ever seen, the penguin assumes that the entire world is made up of ice. This is inductive reasoning, as he has never seen the entire world and cannot be sure the world is made of ice. This is a metaphor, as the penguins represent us as humans, and Antarctica represents the universe. Just like the penguin, we as humans cannot assume that the universe is uniform, because we have not seen the entire universe. When assuming the sun is rising tomorrow, we are also assuming the laws of nature are uniform, even though we have not experienced all of nature.
The problem with assuming the sun will rise tomorrow lies in us being unable to justify that nature is uniform. So we need to prove that nature is uniform to prove that the sun will rise tomorrow. But how do we prove that nature is uniform? There are two ways to prove something. We can either justify the assumption appealing to experience or justify it independent of experience. But it's obvious to say that we can't know independently of experience that nature is uniform. We need to experience and see things ourselves to know that nature is uniform. However, we can't experience all nature in all times and places. This means that we need inductive reasoning to come up with a conclusion and infer the uniform of nature in all places and times. So this means the only way to justify the sun will rise tomorrow is through the means of circular justification. The problem with circular justification is that the justification isn't a justification at all. The justification relies on an assumption that cannot be proved. What we can conclude is that all inductive reasoning relies on an assumption that nature is uniform. The only way to justify that nature is uniform is by inferring the uniformity of it, and inferring something would itself be inductive, so the assumption can't be justified. Our trust in induction isn't justified. One may argue that induction works as we can see it work in our daily lives, but that in itself is circular justification, as we have to infer induction will continue to work.
This is shown by the example of a psychic. If the psychic says herself to be a reliable source of information, and a person trusts them because they say they are reliable, then that wouldn't be a justification at all. It would be circular, as you have to presuppose the psychic is reliable, so what she says is true. If an assumption is justified by another assumption, it's not a justification at all.
The above explanation, however, does not give us the slightest reason to suppose that the sun will rise tomorrow. The explanation for why we strongly believe the sun will rise tomorrow is that we as humans can't help but believe in our inductive reasoning, as we are so regularly exposed to these recurring events that our minds have no choice but to believe the patterns experienced will continue. There are two reasons why people believe. The first is to give evidence or grounds for people believing, or we can explain what caused this person to have those beliefs. Take, for example, a man who believes he's a horse because he was hypnotized during a stage act. This is an example of giving a reason for the belief, but notice no rational justification was given for holding it. No evidence or grounds are given. Another example is a man who believes in astrology because he finds newspaper astrology predictions are often correct. Evidence has been given. If the hypnotized man is asked why they believe they are a horse, it's likely they can't answer. They are stuck with a belief they themselves think is irrational. The human belief in the sun is similar to this. The explanation for why we believe the sun will rise again has no evidence or grounds to support that the belief is true, but it's a belief we are simply stuck with.
It is human nature to reason inductively. By studying history and science, we're able to see patterns in the way the world works and how we live our lives. However, knowing what has happened in the past 100 years and knowing why it's happened doesn't mean that we're able to see what will happen in the next 100 years. We cannot assume the pattern will carry on as you can't see into the future. This theory has confused and angered many scientists and philosophers all over the world, as many find it hard to believe that thinking the sun will rise tomorrow and believing it will explode in the sky are equally as unjustifiable. It contradicts everything we think we know, and it goes against our human instinct. Most people do not believe in this theory, but no one has been able to successfully invalidate it.